Awesome. Well, welcome everyone. This is very exciting for Ollie, for David, for John. Somewhat exciting for me. Ardbeg is like Lefroy. I love it sometimes, and I'm just not interested the other times. So we're gonna have a wild ride. I have only tried 2 of these releases, so maybe I will be converted and then cry about not being able to get any. Welcome. As usual, have your whiskeys out in the glasses. I have posted the tasting order in the chat. The usual, try not to drive after this and all that good stuff. Please post any questions and any tasting notes in the chat, or because it is quite small, put your hand up if you want to unmute and then ask them personally. But without further ado, we should kick off with some whiskey, and we're kicking off with the oldest whiskey, which is super, super exciting. So I believe it's pronounced Traigh, but I like to use the French Très bien, because it's very good. The Traigh 19-year-old Ardbeg to start us off. And I'll give kind of a little bit of a background of Ardbeg, because the way that we think of Ardbeg as a distillery, and kind of the image that we have in our minds of Ardbeg is relatively modern, actually. So the distillery was founded in 1815 by the McDougall family. And when they built the distillery, they essentially built a small village around it, which was super common for the time. So like they built houses, they built a bowling green, because British people, and they built a school for the kids, the local employees and stuff. Super common style of business back in the 1800s. Like you look at when Deanston was a cotton mill, the cotton mill literally built a village around it because all the people who worked there lived there and school there, and it was very much kind of an insular community, I suppose, for convenience. And I think at Deanston they had their own currency as well, but so very, very interesting. But so the village that surrounds Ardbeg now was built around the same time as the distillery. Somebody needs to not call me. So after the founder Alexander McDougall died, he passed the distillery on to his sisters Margaret and Flora, who ran the distillery for quite a while, and it stayed in the family up until about World War I, and the economic depression shut it down. So it was picked up by DCL in the 1950s. So it feels like DCL was grabbing everybody at some point or another. It went through that lifetime, and it was part owned by a man named Hiram Walker. David, you might know, does Hiram Walker have any genetic relation to the Walker family? Because he's a Canadian guy. So I don't know.
Actually, never even considered that there's so many Walkers. Well, there's Billy Walker, there's Johnny, certainly not Johnny Walker, but certainly there's Billy Walker. But so many Walkers that never even crossed my mind.
Yeah. So Hiram Walker was a Canadian businessman who had like a majority stake in Ballantyne's. So he was already big in the whiskey scene before he even came across Ardbeg. And he went into partnership with DCL, which is now called Diageo. And they kind of ran the distillery and kind of kept it going. There was a massive demand for peated whiskey in the 60s, especially for blends. So it had started as a distillery for blends and pretty much continued most of its life. So during the 60s and 70s, it was full steam ahead distillations. but they made a change at the distillery in the 70s, which was kind of a pivotal turning point, where they stopped producing their own peated malt. So they started bringing peated malt in from Port Ellen, and they still do to this day, I believe. They buy in peated malt from Port Ellen, and that kind of upset a couple of like whiskey geek people at the time. They were like, it's the end of an era, you know, it'll never taste the same. So it would be interesting to kind of see if any even exists pre-60s, pre-70s Ardbeg, to compare the two. But yeah, Hiram Walker took over ownership fully in the late 70s, and started making unpeated malt. And I think that's probably a good time to maybe chat a bit about the Traigh Bhan, because obviously with older peated whiskies, you lose some of that smoke to the cask and the charcoal and whatnot. What do we think? Have you guys tried other batches? So the Traigh Bhan is a batch release. I think there's been 4 batches so far, David?
4, yes.
Yeah. Has anyone tried any of the other batches? No? Yeah, Molly?
Yeah, I definitely have, but I don't remember things so well, and I tend to steer away from words I can't pronounce. So
Fair enough.
The batch 2's got the ratio between bourbon and sherry casks is skewed more towards bourbon casks in batch 2 than batch 1. That's obvious.
So when is this one from? When was batch 2 released?
So first batch was released in 2019. Batch 2, when would that have been? A year later, 2020?
Yeah, they were a year apart, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, it's still got that kind of dry ashiness on the nose and that dryness on the palate. It's almost like licking the remains of a charcoal barbecue.
All right. It does have like a very, you know, when you're camping and you've got a fire and it starts raining and all you get is like the smoke and then the leaves, which have been hot, like cool down, and they emit that kind of ozone smell. It reminds me a lot of that. You've only tried batch 2. Yeah. So I was lucky enough to try batch 1. And the worst part is I thought batch 1 was the best. Batch 2 has been good. And then batch 3 and 4, I was like, like it's still good, but when they started, it was just up there, really good.
Way lighter than I expected, just on the palate, like even at 48%, 48, 46.
It's 46.2%, but I get a higher perceived alcohol just on the tip of my tongue. So it drinks like a higher ABV, which is odd for such a relatively old whiskey.
Yeah, it's got that kind of like I completely agree with Hugh's of like caraway seed at the end, but it almost has that like chewing on a cardamom pod kind of spice to it. Don't ever chew on a cardamom pod. It's not a great experience, but it's the vibe of that without the unpleasantness.
Ollie, you are the worst cameraman. We can't see that at all.
I know. I don't know if you can see, but it says here bottled during a storm on the actual label. That's coming up.
Okay.
I mean, just a normal day on
marketing
island.
department goes over the top, don't they?
All I can think of is, have you ever seen that video of the guy trying to pour himself a cup of tea in a windstorm and it's all just like flying away? All the liquid like isn't even making it to the cup.
So you reckon this all just flew away onto the floor and they mocked it up, and that's where that comes from? Right.
I do have to give a mega shout out to David. I don't know if anyone can see, but behind David is one of the most impressive Ardbeg collections, I think, in the Southern Hemisphere. He lives and breathes it. For those who don't know, David started Australia's first premier whiskey focused bottle shop called World of Whiskey. He was one of the first committee embassies for the Ardbeg committee. So David's been living and breathing Ardbeg for quite some time, and a lot of the whiskies that we're drinking tonight, I've been, every time I pop over to David's threatening to open them, and he goes, fine, just grab what you want off the shelf within reason, and we might as well crack it with some good friends tonight. So that's big props to David's for sharing it.
Yeah, well,
Thanks,
well
David.
I mean, I thought that was a green screen.
No, it's all live. This is a proper bottle, 4.5 liters of Uigeadail, which we got to open at some point.
So remember last week when you were here and you said I should come visit you?
Yeah, that's now you know why.
Yeah, now he's more
This is
inclined.
about a third of what you can see behind me. I've also got 6 different shaped Ardbeg glasses.
That they don't excite me quite so much. No.
This is these have been breeding in captivity, and that's a no, even the coffee gets Ardbegized. I'm afraid I have to run off, but just to remind everybody in case it gets missed, the Uigeadail that you're going to be trying is a 2006 bottling. I managed to grab 2 bottles, already finished one. This is the second one. So if anybody does have a current bottle of Uigeadail to compare it to, it would be appreciate your insights and opinions. We've had quite a lot of debate amongst our group that about how they compared, but just excellent. Look forward to rewatching the video, and sorry I can't stay longer.
All right. Thank you, David.
Good. Enjoy it.
Yeah.
So who picked the lineup for these? Like, why are we starting with the 19-year-old?
So that was mostly David and I collaborating. We are starting with the 19-year-old because it is the least peaty on the palate and the lowest ABV. That is, I like if we went to it at the end, which would be like chronologically lovely and accurate, we wouldn't be able to taste it as well. Like we wouldn't be getting all those softer, distinct smoke notes at the start. So that's kind of why we decided to go with that. But from here on, it's relatively chronological.
No, look, I mean, age is just a number. And I was just curious, obviously it's definitely light and a good segue into peated whiskey.
It's also, John, technically the newest whiskey in the lineup. Everything else here was released way long before batch 2 of the Traigh.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Whilst it's the oldest in wood, it's definitely the newest in the lineup, and the rest is all ancient releases. Most of these you can't even find on auctions anymore. Like that's just that collectible. So, as a quick reminder, Ardbeg is, with the exception of Octomore, obviously, because that's designed to be a peat bomb. It is for the OB's original bottlings, it's the highest ppm parts per million whiskey on Isla. So at 55, Lagavulin, Lafroy, Coilla is 35 on average, Bowmore's 25, Bonnar and Brook-Laddie, normal Brook-Laddie 0 to 5 sort of ppm. And so obviously we want to start light on the ppm and kind of work up that scale to kind of answer your question. So a lot of old Islas lose that peat, as Emma said. So I think that's a part of the reason why Emma chose this lineup.
Yeah, it's the way that phenolic compounds travel over the still is that they're distilled at the end of the run. So like towards the tails is when you get those smoke phenol compounds coming over. So how you make the cut in the distillation is really important. But then how long you leave it in a barrel for also makes a difference, because obviously charcoal is great at filtering things. So the more exposure it gets with a barrel, the more phenolic acid is removed just through general breathing into the wood. So I wanted to, well, plus it's one of my favorites. But yeah, I wanted to start us off easy and and get into it from there. So the second whiskey is the Ardbeg Almost There. So this was the third part of a set that was released. So Ardbeg was mothballed in the 1980s, and it kind of produced whiskey intermittently and kind of really flew under the radar, except for, you know, massive whiskey geeks, until 1997. It was purchased by LVMH, which is Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy, which you probably know from all the words I just spouted, is a luxury brand portfolio. So they're really interesting in that they are a parent company luxury brand, and then they have 75 different houses within their brand. So they own obviously Louis Vuitton, I believe they own Prada, Versace, a couple of others, Moet Wine, Hennessy Cognac, and they own 6 different like business sector houses and whatnot. They own Glenmorangie Distillery and now Ardbeg Distillery as of 1997. So they were able to release some older stock. When they purchased it, they bought all the stock. They bought, you know, the whole kit and caboodle. But obviously they wanted to bring up a core release 10-year-old age statement. So while they were waiting for it to mature, they ran this series, which was all about showing the progression to get to that 10-year-old core age statement. So in 2004, they launched the Very Young. In 2006, they launched the Still Young. The Almost There was their 2007 release. And then they released a core, a 10-year-old cask strength release as well, to be like, this is it, but watered down then. So yeah, this is a 9-year-old. So this is literally like legitimately almost there for what they wanted to produce for their core age statement. And then after that, they did the Renaissance, which was the proper 10-year-old at cask strength. It's fully ex-bourbon cask matured. And I mean, I would love to see what you guys like think about it, because this nose is so bizarre. It smells like the inside of a steak. You know, when you get a medium rare steak and you cut into it and it's got that like pinkish inside bit, and it's not like seasoned, and it's not like charred, and it's just like.
So I hate that you've said that, because that's all I can smell now. I was going to say there's almost like this citrus note coming through.
There's a little bit of like,
it smells wet. Like it's so confusing. It just smells wet. Mind you, so did the other one. It's sort of like wet moss on the first one. But I don't know where the citrus is coming from, if it's fully bourbon matured. And
it's got like a peppercorn cream thing as well.
You just have to one up me, don't you? Like, you know, you can't just agree. But it's all right. It's all right.
Honestly,
like, tasting no punching bag. That's all right.
The worst part is my tasting notes are like nowhere near as bonkers as Lockie from Whiskey Nailments. Like some of his tasting notes are just left of field, absolutely wild. It's a whole journey and a story just to describe one aspect.
For those who don't know, I was just going to say to the right of me, I don't know if it's on the same screen for everyone, is Mr. John Jarvis from Hobart Whiskey. He's our resident hooligan tonight, designed to cause chaos in Emma's tastings, because they're so professional now. We just need to cause a little bit of chaos tonight. But
well, I didn't even wear a singlet, so when I get my shirt off a little bit later, it'll be way easier.
Just needed to bring the tone down. Well, because John, your first kind of whiskey love was Ardbeg, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's always been my go-to. The Cor of Reckon is my daily drinker. Not that I drink every day, not all day anyway. That's both of those statements are lies. But yeah, basically one of my biggest loves to get into whiskey was the Ardbeg 10. You know, it was affordable. It was good whiskey. Basically, the Lefroy 10 was my gateway into peated whiskey, and then once I got onto the Ardbeg 10, yeah, it was all downhill from there. Cor of Reckon's my go-to. There was only maybe an 8-week period where I didn't drink it because at one point somebody made me laugh when I was having a sip and it come up through my sinus and out my nose. That was the only time in my life I thought I was going to die. I was having heart palpitations laying on the floor, apparently, yeah. So, and here I am, still alive and well.
Still drinking Ardbeg.
Smelling whiskey that smells wet. I mean, nosing whiskey. We're classy here.
This is because I got lemon on my first nose, but now I've sipped it. It's like I'm getting like a little bit of salty furniture polish vibes, a little bit metallic, and the citrus is all gone. And it's like I don't know. I wanted it. It's stolen from me.
He's getting some floral notes. I can kind of agree. Like those, you know, when you get those white flowers and you leave them a little bit too long and they go a little bit soggy.
I just want to put wet in front of every tasting note. It's like wet leather, you know, like not
Well,
like suit leather, but like a real leather.
Yeah.
Anyone game to add some water to it? It should technically get sweeter.
I don't think it needs it though.
No, it drinks so well. Yeah.
But I thought they were all going to be, I didn't check them before we started tonight, and I thought they were all going to be a lot higher. So my in-between drink is a 70% cask sample, just to make sure that I'm okay.
Around you.
That's right. That's my grounding dram. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah, so I will say, so I have a love-hate relationship with Ardbeg. So
That's not what you said before though, right? You gave me a very prominent tasting note.
Well, so the thing is, I spent an early part of my bartending career working in nightclubs, and typically it's only ever Lefroy 10, Ardbeg 10 if they have any peated whiskey at all. And I used to be so, like, I'm more chill with it now, because I've tried a lot more whiskeys in my life, but I used to be so sensitive to Ardbeg 10. I could smell it when someone opened a bottle from across the room, and I hated that smell. So I'm slowly, you know, beginning this relationship with Ardbeg, and I will say that almost there is kind of winning me over, but unfortunately it's not in the lineup tasting tonight. But the ultimate is Dark Cove for me, which is just black sherry barrel cask matured Ardbeg, and like it changed my life. I was like, yeah, that was my come to Ardbeg moment.
We're all fans of the distillery here. What are the people's Ardbeg moments that rocked your world?
Yeah, because they've done so many committee releases. Is there any add in the chat or let us know what was your, like, what's your weird and wacky and cool Ardbeg that you've loved? So there's just so many, so many. Actually, fun fact for those who are familiar with the Ardbeg Grooves release, Ardbeg originally wanted to call it Love and Peace because obviously it's got a very hippy-dippy kind of style to it. They wanted to call it Love and Peace, but the Scotch Whisky Association said it was not allowed to use the word love on a bottle of whiskey because false advertising or some nonsense like that. So they had to change the name. So they ended up with Grooves, which I thought was pretty cool. That Scotch Whisky Association gets real antsy about love.
I mean, to be fair, like Grooves isn't really sort of appealing to me though. Like I'm not really the sort of person that's going to be into, you know, grooves. Dark Cove, yeah, Cor of Reckon, Oogie, yeah, Grooves, yeah.
Yeah. It was certainly like a really interesting, I think that's kind of where their stylistic their labels took a more stylistic turn after Grooves.
Yeah.
You saw like the Mickey Heads bottling with the whole pirate Ardbeg. And the more recent bottling, there's been one with a label that has this, I don't know if anyone's played Cuphead. It's got a very like Cuphead 1920s cartoon style to it. And I was like, I want it just for the label, but I'm not going to spend money just because of a label. But they nearly got me. Hugh loved the Ardbeg more 10 cast strength. Nice. Oliver was the Uigeadail. The Kelpie. Oh, Curtis, the Kelpie. Yes. I nearly forgot about that one. That was such a cool release. I think that was probably one of the early ones I tried working at Whiskey On Taste. Oh, awesome. Very nice.
I recently cracked a bottle of the Serendipity, which was the I think it was the Glen Murray Ardbeg collaboration. First crack, like cork broke, so that really put me in a bad mood. I've still got most of the bottle, but we also cracked it at the end of a very big night, so it was very good, but also we would have drank acetone at that point and been happy.
You would have grabbed a bottle of Turks if it had been nearby.
You know, you got to do what you got to do.
Yep.
I'm a simple man.
Mark, you're lucky enough to be at the Grooves Day filming in Birmingham. Amazing. That's so cool.
It was an amazing day. It was so good.
I hear that the Ardbeg Day events are just absolutely wild.
They had a combi van out the front as well, and everyone had to take turns, and they had like a screen in there, and they had this whole sort of semi-animated tour of sort of like the history of Ardbeg, and then all their sort of flares to it as well. And yeah, it was just, we got to try it, we got to watch the filming, we got to do the live action, we got to do the combi van they had. It was just a day and a half. It was so good.
Oh, that sounds amazing. Yeah. Well, Ollie, shall we move on to your favorite or your come to Jesus moment of Ardbeg?
Well, I found one because I was like, surely my favorite whiskey. Then I did find an unopened one, so I'm going to do the comparison as well.
Nice.
Because when do you get to try a 2006 release? That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So the Uigeadail is a no age statement release that they did, but the consensus is that it's the core 10-year-old with a heavy dose of ex-sherry cask Ardbeg in the vatting. So it was launched not long after the 10. Obviously, they had a lot of further cask maturing Ardbegs and sherry cask maturing Ardbegs at the time. And honestly, some of the sherry cask Ardbegs that if you can ever find them in independent bottlings, they're rare as hen's teeth, but they are spectacular. I got to try a 16-year-old Malts of Scotland bottling that I think it's one of my top 10 whiskies of all time. And that would kind of like set the stamp of okay, maybe it's not how you thought it used to be. But yeah, so they've got some really, really cool sherry casking into this mix. I don't know if the very ratio between bourbon and sherry has changed from year to year, but this is a core range item that they launched. Uigeadail is named for the loch where they source a lot of their water from. And they have a penchant for naming a lot of their releases after local environmental things. So the Corryvreckan, John, your favorite, is named after the whirlpool in the Gulf of Corryvreckan. It's the third largest whirlpool in the world. Super cool. Like, look up photos of it on Google because it's bizarre to look at an image of a whirlpool and just be like, that's just there and happening and constant. But it's very, very cool. So yeah, the Uigeadail is, the loch and the water and all that.
Oh shit! It's actually like a real whirlpool.
It is like a real whirlpool. Why did you doubt me?
I didn't know it was a real thing.
Yeah, I will say Britain is very famous for their very bizarre natural occurrences. So you've got like the Corryvreckan whirlpool, which there was like a lot of mythology from the early settlers on Isla about the whirlpool, and so like a lot of those myths and those stories have kind of been told through generations. And then you've got over near Bushmills in County Antrim, I think it is. You have the Causeway, which is these hexagonal stones that are natural formation, and they're just like so perfectly shaped. You're like, there's no possible way that it's natural. It's so bizarre. So yeah, there's a lot of really cool and really interesting geological and environmental curiosities, I suppose you'd call them, in Britain. So yeah, but definitely take a look at the photos of the whirlpool and of the Causeway. Yeah.
Where does it go to? Like, where does the whirlpool go?
Well, I think, and I'm not a marine scientist, but I think a large part of it comes from different oceans or different bodies of water meeting, and then the water that gets sucked in gets funneled back out at the ocean floor. It's kind of like I don't know.
You can probably make it up. Nobody's sort of arguing against you now. So, like, I reckon just make it up. Like, it sounds pretty convincing what you're saying already. So,
well, it's kind of like you know when you drain your bathtub.
There you go.
oh,
Hey,
right.
there we go. Yeah, it's like when you drain your bathtub, and instead of the water going down the drain, the water goes back elsewhere, and then that water comes back in around the top.
Oh, but see, that's what I thought. I thought there was a drain below it, and I thought it must go somewhere into a cavity to create the suction because.
So Emma was right. There's the tide coming in and then the tide coming out from the bay. And because of the indents on the seabed, they collide with each other and it ends up just creating a whirlpool.
Yeah. Hey, all those years of science at uni weren't wasted. Tom, there's whiskey down there. Apparently, so there have been some divers who dive in the area, and they say it's one of the most difficult dives you can do in the world. It's very treacherous, it's very tricky. Boats avoid it at all costs, just in case as well. Yeah, absolutely wild. I imagine there might be a couple of ships that had whiskey on them that did not fare so well.
It could technically be the easiest dive because it'll take you straight to the bottom, but you're not going to get back up.
It works. It's not how it works. You don't want to go down fast and then like get stuck, and you don't want to accidentally come up, too quickly when you're diving. Nobody wants the bends, Yeah, exactly. Down easy, not up. No. So yeah, it's super interesting, but like water is so bizarre as well, to be honest. Like if you ever see those images of two oceans that are different densities meeting, and there's like a literal line and a color difference between the two, it's bizarre and so cool. But yeah, what are we thinking of the Uigeadail? Like, and for Ollie and I think Hugh, is it, that have modern bottlings, if you're comparing them?
So the newer one is super floral and very fresh, and it actually smells like peat. The old one actually smells, I'm comparing noses here, that the nose is like old bonfires and bacon. Like yeah, it's significantly different noses, just to start.
Yeah, I'm definitely getting bacon on this one. Like there's cheese and bacon puffball things, majiggers. Yeah, where it's like bacon but artificial flavored bacon.
I haven't had a chance to try the latest.
Haven't had a chance.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to try the newer one because I've only got the one glass. I'm traveling.
Fair enough.
But mate, straight from the bottle. Like, we won't judge you. We've seen Ollie earlier drinking from the bottle, so it's fine. Still quite well. This one, the 2006, is quite grassy. A lot of that sort of grass coming through to me for me.
Yeah, it's really nice.
I'm gonna admit that I'm very disappointed with David because he may have just ruined Uigeadail currently for me, because the mouthfeel, the older version is just, it's very thick, it's moreish, it's compared to the other one, it's much lighter, and it's just full of body. Like it's got layers of complexity. The other one's like just a bit of a meat smoke bomb. This one feels like you get to like marinate in the meat before you eat it. If I don't know, that image makes sense.
Just roll around in the marinade. No, I know exactly what you mean. I feel like some of the Ardbegs, they, like the earlier releases where they were like, oh well, we'll give it a crack, we're great, but then as they go on with batches over time, they start to overthink it, and it's like, but you removed all the interesting, complexity and whatnot. It's still a great dram, but there's something missing that was there before that they decided to vat out or blend out, or however they chose to do it. I mean, it's like I got the opportunity to try an Octomore 1.1, and it was like tasting the early manuscript of the Bible. Like it was rough in different places. And I'm like, I can see where they started and how they got to the newer series, but there's something special about that raw, unfiltered, how they were doing it at the start. And I feel like the Uigeadails are kind of like that. There's this special moment of how it was at the start that has been, lost to time, I suppose.
Yeah, there's definitely a different approach to the newer Uigeadail, where it seems like younger whiskey as well. Maybe a bit of first fill sherries added in there too. So for me, I got this like big raisin punch, whereas the older one, it was more subdued fruit with a bit of tropical notes and a bit more softer fruits. Whereas this one was more of a punchy raisins with like mustard seed and heading into like roast pork and burnt sugar. And a very dense oak, but you can I can taste some of the younger alcohol that's definitely in there. So
I'm thinking one's like fully matured in the single cast, the other one's like finished or something. Like it is that different.
Yeah.
It's like eating a fresh raspberry versus eating raspberry leather that's been like sugared and pulped and richer and like, yeah, interesting.
Definitely get this sort of like vegetative note come through, not in a bad way, but just sort of like that old dripping vegetable dripping.
Kofa.
So can we get a bottle of this tonight? Is that something the whiskey list has?
You're totally going to rob David when you go to visit him, aren't you?
Oh, look, as soon as I know where he lives, I'm just going to back up with a semi.
I don't doubt that for 1 minute.
Just hey, David, I need to send you some whiskey. What's your address?
He's in New Zealand next week, right? So
Yeah. I'm sure. Too bad he has cats and not a guard dog for his assistant.
Does he still have his lizard?
Yeah.
Oh, the lizard that lives in the front yard. Okay, I thought I was like,
Oh, so not a pet lizard?
It's not a pet lizard. No.
It's a random wild lizard.
Yes.
Emma, he collects dragons as well. And snakes. Yeah, he's got a whole reptile collection in the garage.
Like live reptiles.
Yes. And usually when people like call wires in his part of town, like the other week he sent me a photo, 9 a.m. on a Sunday, an old lady freaked out. There's a carpet python 3 meters long in her backyard. David gets the phone call as a volunteer to go collect it and move it on to a different location.
Which is in his garage. Like, what, he just have like cages or, well,
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be hard to visit now. There's no chance I'm getting Rachel there if he's got fucking pythons.
Well, he doesn't own any snakes currently. He just relocates them at the moment.
Right. I used to relocate snakes as well, just in a slightly different fashion.
Curtis, yes, I decided to crack open a fresh bottle of the new Yugi just to compare, because this is a moment in history. So it's fun.
Yeah, because I love your comment about the constant around the like early or mid 2000s bottling releases were probably, some of the most amazing, like what they were doing. I think there was that period probably up to around like 2012-ish, maybe 2014-ish. And that was like peak Ardbeg in terms of the cool releases they were doing, the core releases they were doing. It was really, really amazing. I love the experimentation that they're doing with the new ones, but I feel like a bit of that shine is lost, if that makes sense. If they're doing all these different things constantly and releasing them within like 6 months of each other, and it becomes like a bit of an overload of all peat, all Ardbeg, all whiskey. So it's nice to revisit these older ones and have those memories. Tom, probably they find the Uigeadail for the masses not as interesting but more approachable. Absolutely.
It also it's like I've got the two at the moment. So that's the most recent Uigeadail release, and then that's the one we're tasting. And that one, and I've got the 10 kind of balancing out between them as like a reference point. And the most recent Uigeadail like links back to that 10 so closely. Like you get like that back palate, like fennel and aniseed, whereas this one you get a lot more of that sherry cask influence. Like it's sweet, it's moreish, it's delicious, but it's a lot more different, or it goes further away from that 10. So I find that one, it's almost like as if they've kind of found a recipe that works, that people relate back to Ardbeg and going, okay, sweet, that's how we're going to release our core releases. They all have to have like a consistency, because I think like that would go kind of away from it, but like so delicious in its own right. So I wonder if that had any influence on it. And I think that's exactly what Tom said before, making it for the masses.
Yeah, and it might be that thing of like they saw how popular the 10 was, and they're like, well, maybe if we craft the Uigeadail to be more complementary and more similar to the 10, people will pick up on it more. But it could just be like Ollie said, potentially that the sherry casks from this Uigeadail were fully sherry matured and batted in, and then the new ones are sherry finished and then batted in. So it could be that as well. Like, we don't know that that information, and they probably wouldn't share that with us.
I think what I'm most impressed about is, Curtis, your new Oogie port is like 70 mil. Like, I love that you haven't scrimped on a pour of like.
It looks more than it is just because of the glass.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. If you go back and notice the first two now, they're so like just light compared to this one. This one's just like, I hate the word meaty, but there's just so much more going on. It's a lot richer. It's more intense. Like the intensity of it is insane when you compare it to the other two, which arguably are, I don't know, they're old, right? But old and young.
Very old and very young, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious, when did Bill Lumsden start working over at Ardbeg?
That
He was
would
already with them, because he's been working with LV, like Glenmorangie, for 30 years or something. So he would have come straight across when they bought the distillery.
Yeah, it would have been 1997. He became under his wing as well. So yeah, I think from my understanding as well, Dr. Bill Lumsden does more lab work as well nowadays. They built him this shiny new laboratory at Glenmorangie Distillery, so he's got his toys to tinker away with. Yeah,
because you've got Colin George in there now. So Colin George came from Port Ellen. He was the malting manager there, and then he's now the Ardbeg distillery manager. And then you got Gillian, and you've also got someone else that's kind of running production. But yeah, I think Colin George is there, kind of based there now.
Yeah, Colin replaced Mickey.
Yeah, that's right. And that was only a year ago?
Yeah, recently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
before we jump on the next dram, I had a good chat with Bill when he was here a few years ago. That new lab member that you mentioned, he actually gets to teach university students all about phenols. Like he's just going like mad nuts. Like that's his world. He loves it. And yeah, he's pushing the limits, you know, in terms of like what our understanding is of peated whiskies and all the other cool flavors that come out of it. So
yeah, cool. Well, I mean, the science geek in me would love to see it one day, but yeah, it's super interesting. And I think that is one great thing about LVMH as a parent company. From the way I've seen it run, if you look at their financial statements, they don't really think about their whiskey distilleries very much. They're more focused on their wine and their cognac companies. So Ardbeg and Glenmorangie kind of like get to do whatever they want. It's like, here you go, have fun, like do your thing. We're not stressed about you. But also, so this is an interesting tidbit of information about LVMH. LVMH has certain brands in their portfolio that are loss leaders. So for example, Versace does not turn a profit at all year on year. It is not a profitable business. It is kept alive by Louis Vuitton and Prada and all those other brands that they have. But they keep this Versace because it gives the impression of competition. By not having Versace, you know, people are potentially going to go buy from another luxury brand. So it's very interesting the way that they've developed their company, their business, their brand. And I don't think Ardbeg and Glenmorangie are loss leaders at all. Not at all. They're very profitable distilleries. But it's kind of interesting to see how the parent company doesn't mind if they don't turn a profit in a certain year. So it really gives Ardbeg a lot more wiggle room to do whatever they want and not have like big business oversight to them, which I think is really good, to be honest. Like having that financial freedom can really elevate a brand and elevate a distillery. So well, we should get on to the Ardbog. I am reliably informed this is Lockie's favorite Ardbeg of all time. So I have high expectations. But yeah, again, named to celebrate their local landscape, the marshy peat bogs around the Port Ellen area. So Ardbeg is in the town of Port Ellen. It is very confusing that they use the same names over and over and over again on Isla. You've got like Port Charlotte Distillery, and then you've got the Port Charlotte Hotel. And it's like 10 names are the only names they use for anything on the island. But yeah, so this was a 2013 Ardbeg Day release, which was for Fèis which is a music and culture festival that's been running since 1984. It is absolutely a party. So it started out predominantly music, and then in the 90s, the distilleries were like, oh, hey, like we're part of the identity of the island. Do you want us to do something for Fèis? And they were like, yeah, sure. So each distillery has a day where they run.
How's that Wi-Fi extender going, Emma? Yeah. Oh, hang on.
There we are. Yeah. No matter what I do, I cannot get good Wi-Fi on my goddamn laptop.
Last thing we heard, you said they started Ardbeg Day and then it went quiet.
All right. So yeah, this is bottled for Ardbeg Day. Did you hear my spiel about Fèis?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, cool. And then Whiskey came along. You got like Bunnahabhain Day, Lagavulin Day, and then Ardbeg Day is the last day of the festival. apparently they throw one of the biggest parties, and they do a special committee release every year for Ardbeg Day. So they typically nowadays they do a normal release of the bottling and then a committee release, which is a cask strength version of it. It's the 1st of June every year. And initially this was only an embassy exclusive, though I think a couple of bottles were eventually released. It's a vatting of 10-year-old Ardbeg that was matured in ex-bourbon and ex-manzanilla casks. And I've actually got this great story from one of the old international head of sales for Ardbeg. And he was telling me he joined the company, and he was renting a little house on Isla so that he could live near the distillery and whatnot. And it was coming up to his first Fèis festival, and they're like, "Oh, it's always, you know, a big event, right?" And I don't know if anyone's been to Scotland and specifically been camping in Scotland, but if there is a plot of land, it is legal to camp on it in Scotland. Like any potential piece of public property, hell, even private property looking land. So he wakes up, it's the first day of Fèis, and he opens his curtain, and there is like 10 German families camped on his front lawn. And he was like, what? Like they just popped up overnight. Instantly they were there. Like he didn't even hear them setting up their tents or anything like that. So the island swells for this festival, and people predominantly like camp because accommodation books out months and months in advance. So it is very fun. I believe Yao is going for Fèis this year. So I'm very, very jealous.
All right, Emma, we've got our own sister festival here in Melbourne.
We do. It is
the only official Fèis events during Fèis anywhere else in the world outside of Fèis itself. They've chosen Melbourne, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's honestly a whole lot cheaper than flying to Scotland, paying for accommodation there. And then trying to like elbow people out of the way for the releases. We're lucky enough to get the releases sent to us. All right, now I haven't even tasted this yet. Oh, whoa. Oh my God. Yeah, I'll turn on the sprinkler here. It's almost got that like AstroTurf thing, like with the rubber tire particles in the fake grass.
It's definitely to me a lot more of that sort of rubbery sort of peat, like diesel peat, than it is like that mossy, earthy wetness.
Yeah,
but it's good. It's probably don't tell David, but it's probably my favorite so far in the lineup, even more so than the Uigeadail.
See, this is probably not the one I would reach to first, because I think it's got a lot of those notes that those early Ardbegs have for me that were like that erring on acetone.
Yep.
Yeah, but it's good. I mean, like it's an experience.
Wow.
Yeah, I quite like
So
that.
diplomatic.
I quite like this one. It has like a creaminess to it. Like it's got like a thickness and a creaminess to it that I really enjoyed. I'd probably still go back to that. What was it, 2006 Uigeadail? But this one, yeah, has like a creaminess to it.
It's got almost like a milky coffee, like bitterness
almost
thing.
to it, yeah.
Yeah.
It almost has like menthol still, but like that sweetness I like, and that creaminess, yeah, that thickness to it.
I will say that tiny dribble with a glass full of water was excellent.
I lived in a share house with 4 other adult males for about 5 years, and it sort of has like a little bit of that sort of sourness that you'd expect to find from a leftover feed in the fridge, you know, just a few days past its prime. And it's still good, right? Like you're still going to go it, but it's just got just a little bit of that funk going on, and which could be.
It almost seems like a butyric note, like that butyric acid.
Butyric acid, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, good call. He's getting chocolate fudge, yeah, as well. Yeah, you are. Michael agrees with you. Long finish, yeah. It's. I thought you were going to say socks for a second, not food in the fridge. About your roommate experience, because it's got a bit of those like funky socks things. But I know what you mean when you've made a pasta, like a creamy pasta, and you like open it up and you're like,
Yeah.
If I shove it in for an extra 2 minutes in the microwave.
That's right. Like you do the smell test, you check it, and it's sort of on the fence, and you know, you'll have it anyway. But you know, it's good to know that whether you're going to have gastro or not.
You can plan your day around it.
But I've drank my fair share of Ardbeg 10, and I can understand why maybe you would lean against this one slightly, because it probably is a little bit more of that, maybe a bit more raw, a bit more of that, just a bit more alcohol in it, maybe. I didn't even check the ABV.
Slightly lower than the Uigeadail, so I don't know. Though to be fair, the Uigeadail is a 2006 release, and you can sometimes get ABV drops over long periods of time in bottle, but it's usually not significant. It usually takes a very long time. So, or it could just be old bottle effect as well. So
yeah,
who knows?
No, I think
really want to, but sorry,
Yeah.
just interrupt me. Just speak over me, because otherwise I'll just keep talking. I seen Mark earlier unmute his mic and then mute it again, then unmute it and mute it. Like you just got to keep talking. Like just, you know, survival of the fittest here.
The Uigeadail in 2006, I think, was more aged. Like there seemed to be a bit more like lower ethanol profile for the whole dram. Whereas I think this one's probably got a bit of youth to it. It's sharper. It's got some bolder flavors to it. It's hitting a little bit harder.
Yeah, absolutely. It might be that Manzanilla cask as well that like is bringing those funky earthy notes to the forefront. So I don't know.
I was going to say that this has a lot of peat in it, but because of the cask components and maybe the ABV, we're not getting that peat in like the smack in your face.
Yeah.
Against my better judgment, I did add a drop of water, and it took that edge off. But I do think it sort of lost so much of that richness, which is what I like. I like that, you know, that big intense Ardbeg. So
yeah.
How long was this one aged? What's the age statement on it?
It's 10 years old. So it's running a 10-year-old ex-bourbon and 10-year-old ex-Manzanilla. So it's pretty much very similar in age to the Uigeadail we just had, and not too far off the almost there. So it's so interesting to see slight casking changes make a world of difference. So.
Is there any other whiskies you can think of that have had that Manzanilla influence on it? I can't think of any off the top of my head.
Phil Herman's done some Manzanilla single cask releases, I believe.
Didn't Glenmorangie do one and Bonahava?
They just recently released that Australian release. Who did they release it to? It was like an Australian exclusive just recently.
Glenmorangie or?
Yeah, Glenmorangie.
For the club.
Yeah.
Not certain.
Because that came out like a couple months ago, I think. I saw
that was the Whiskey Club.
Oh, yeah.
I haven't tried it yet.
I'm curious to try it because I have a soft spot for the Tale of series. I really enjoyed the Tale of Cake against my better judgment. And then I was like, oh, the casking on the Tale of Winter looked really good. And then I had the 2 bottles and I was like, shit, now I'm collecting them, aren't I?
Tale of Forest sounds good.
It does
That
look
comes out
really
in a couple
good.
months. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I'm super curious to see the Manzanilla cask because we obviously know Glenmorangie in a Sauternes cask, in a port cask. in a sherry cask. So yeah, that'll be really interesting.
I think two of those are about to change. The Nectar Door, which is Sauterne cask, is about to change to a 14 and less influence from that. And then the La Santa, I think, is about to change as well.
Yeah,
they're about to change again.
Because they changed the Quinta Reuben so that it was a 4-year maturation instead of a 2-year maturation in Ruby Port casks. But I think some of the others are, they're rebranding again. It's very interesting. I don't know why. It's their decision. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it changes. So shall we move on to perhaps the next whiskey, the Galileo? Now, obviously, Galileo, space, all that good stuff. So this is a special bottling in 2011 to celebrate the launch of the space venture by NanoRacks, who sent vials of Ardbeg whiskey into the outer layers of the atmosphere. So you've got like, the atmosphere has many different layers, and you've got a zero gravity layer just at the edge of what we would say space is. And obviously NASA helped on this mission because they were still running things up and down to the space shuttle and whatnot, space station. There is no space whiskey in this. There's no space whiskey in the next one either. Space whiskey is not happening. They were just small sample vials. Only a very select few people got to try them, as far as I'm aware. But it was an interesting experiment to see how the whiskey would mature in a zero gravity situation. So so this whiskey was distilled in 1999. It is a 12-year-old whiskey. And it's a marriage of ex-bourbon and ex-Sicilian Marsala wine casks. So they really kind of themed a couple of their releases around this super interesting space exploration opportunity, which is really cool. If you age whiskey in the stratosphere above Scotland, is it still Scotch? So that's the problem. Because the Earth is constantly rotating so quickly, this is my aerospace engineering science showing, because the Earth is rotating so quickly, it would never be able to stay above Scotland. Like, it would have to have like a propulsion jetpack on it to stay above Scotland at all times. Like, it doesn't work like that because the Earth rotates so fast. I think the Earth rotates at like 1,300 kilometers a minute or whatever, something crazy fast.
You can put it as a geosynchronous orbit if you really want to. And go above the stratosphere.
So they're all taken up by satellites. That's the thing. There's only a certain amount. So what Hugh is, from my understanding, from what I remember, geosynchronous is where like it literally lines up and stays in that position, but all of those spaces are taken up by satellites, and like the only way you can get anything there is you have to shoot the satellite that's already in that orbit down and then replace it. There is so much space junk up there. Like, you think we're wasteful on the planet Earth? It is a wild frontier in space. Like, it is a miracle they can set jets off without bumping into all this crap that's up there. So like, look, yes, maybe, but that would be really expensive. Like, you'd be fighting with the telecommunications companies to take up that space in that orbit, and like, it would just be too tricky. And that's the thing as well, is it's like, what kind of vessel is it going to be in? Is it, of a significant size that it might interfere with other things in the orbit? Who knows? It's very confusing.
Is it actually that age statement because it would age at a different rate? Is it actually that age statement because it would age at a different rate? Because when you actually get that far out, when you're traveling that fast, you end up with a time dilation tube.
It's 12 light years old.
I mean, you could probably calculate the time dilation difference. I think at the point to which they sent them, it wasn't very far. So I think there was still enough, like, look, when people say zero gravity, they don't actually know what they mean when they say zero gravity, essentially half the time. Because you're never not affected by gravity, it can just be negligible. Like if you're far enough away from a heavy body, like the gravity is negligible, it's not going to affect you. But that doesn't mean the gravity isn't existing. It just isn't working, if that makes sense. So yeah. It's enough space talk. Space talk. What do we think of the whiskey?
Something worth considering when you're drinking this is, whilst this whiskey is like still occasionally up on retail and auctions between 700 and 1200 right now, you can get it. It came out for like 130 at Dan Murphy's 12 years ago, whenever it was. So yeah, judge this on that price point. Add your inflation, your 3% year on year, whatever it is. It's not going to be a $1,200 dram, and maybe a couple hundred off at best. But at 49%, it's would you say Marsala and bourbon? Yeah.
Yeah, Marsala and bourbon. Don't know what the ratio was again. I imagine it's probably more ex-bourbon than Marsala, but
I mean, it's probably the best space whiskey I've ever had, to be fair.
off from space.
Yeah, from space,
Paul's getting nuts of Van Allen belts on this one. I never got enough into astrophysics to learn the stuff. I just know about atmospheres and sending things into the sky. But yeah, that's super interesting.
It's
I think it's
fine.
probably very similar.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's good, but yeah, you're right. It's probably not $1,200 a bottle good. I mean, I could buy like half a bottle of Lark for that. So you can edit this before you push that out, right? Just bleep out the words.
You suspect after 5 drams I'm that efficient. It's just hit send, upload to YouTube, done.
Yeah.
It's been very, very tame, just so you know.
Something I was supposed to edit out.
What's cool for me is they've all been peated whiskies, and we've had a little bit of sweet cast. This is the first sweet peat I think we've had tonight as a flavor profile. Like, it is dominating.
Mm.
The others have been quite meaty, moreish, fruity, but there's a candy sweetness to it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I feel for me it's very similar to the Ardbog in that it reminds me of where the Ardbeg was acetone, the Galileo is nail polish, not remover, just nail polish. A really high quality, expensive polish, which sometimes can smell actually quite nice. It's like smelling permanent markers, sometimes it doesn't smell awful. But yeah, it's super interesting. Also, fun fact, if you go to Florence, Italy, you can see Galileos too. Just a little aside there. It's really pretty. But yeah, no, it's super interesting, and like a 1999 distillation. So we're like getting into those early days of LVMH ownership and distillation, which makes it a little more interesting.
It's still really quite light. I get a bit of that tropical fruit punch sort of stuff coming through. Still quite creamy on the palate finish. It's quite nice. I enjoy it. Yeah.
What is everyone else tasting? I'm super curious as well.
This is one of my favorite drams from
Ah,
Ardbeg. I actually bought 2 bottles of it when I saw it at Vintage Cellars for $125. And I was like, oh yeah, I really like that whiskey. I'm going to buy it. Buy both those bottles because I know it's going to probably run out of stock soon. I drunk one of them, and then when it came around to opening the next one, I realized it was $400. I don't know what to do now. So I've still got it on my shelf.
rough. there's always those moments where you're like, I should have bought a case of this just in case. Like, it would have been worth it. Fair enough. Yeah, it's super interesting. All right, shall we move on to the last whiskey of the evening? Because I know we have definitely been chatting a bit more than we normally do at some of these events.
I think to be fair, all our top shelves just end up being geeky and super fun about whiskey. Like we do our normal virtual tastings. We go through the recipe. You see you later, goodbye. These are like, we just gotta, it's like sitting at a bar and just yammering on.
Yeah. Except there's no other patrons where to make more noise. It's Friday anyway. Yeah, it is. Oh, it is Friday. Whoops. I have no sense of time or place or anything. But yeah, so the last whiskey, the Supernova 2015 release. So it was the third in the Space series. So it was supposed to be like the last one in the Space series with this NanoRacks event. And it coincided with the return of the vials from space. Again, there is no space whiskey in this sample, no space whiskey.
So what you're saying is this whiskey has been in space? Yeah. Right. Yeah. I get it.
All
I
the
can read between the lines. I can
all
read
the disclaimers, all the disclosure. I would love to try their space whiskey one day. I don't think it's necessarily an affordable option for them long term. I know how much some of those NASA missions costs. It is.
I could see the whiskey list sponsoring like something going into space.
Mate, what bank would we have to rob to afford that?
So fun fact, it's getting significantly cheaper with SpaceX to send stuff up, like very cheap in comparison to even 2 years ago. Bringing stuff back safely is still one of the most costly exercises in human existence today. Anything that needs to be consumed or human or it's bio fibers or liquid, it's very hard to bring stuff back.
Yeah.
Just send it up in a balloon over the US somewhere into space and see how it goes.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think you should hedge your bets and send some stuff away now if it's that cheap. And then by the time you're ready to pull back this 20-litre cask that's been there for 10 years, you'll be able, they'll have systems in place.
And technology will be advanced enough.
Yeah, you'll just be able to fly up and like tap it then and there and like bottled in space. Yeah.
Oh my God, 20 years in space, that's shorter. The mission to Mars would be shorter than that. Like, the mission to Mars is a 3-year round trip.
I've not left Australia, so, forgive me for not knowing, how long things take. I'm a simple man.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, you agree with me. Yep, that's cool.
I'm moving forward. I'm going to talk about this whiskey if it comes.
All right, sorry, I interrupted. All right, can you tell us about this whiskey?
Yeah, so again, no space whiskey. So it was supposed to be the last in the series, but then they brought it back in 2019 and 2020. So there've been supernovas and hypernovas, and the idea behind it is it's just the most heavily peated spirit Ardbeg can produce. And I will kind of say that like 2018, 2019, we were starting to see this massive popularity in Octomore, and people were like really getting into Octomore. So I feel like it was a strategic release to be like, this is our heaviest peated, we brought it back. So yeah, again, it's a no age statement. I don't know when it was distilled, but this was the first of the Supernova releases that they have done.
What's the CR stand for?
Ollie?
Committee release.
Yeah.
Committee release. Okay, yeah.
Which is annoying because all the committee releases are cask strength and they don't use CS in it anywhere. And it's, yeah. When you can introduce jargon, the big corporates will do it on purpose for shits and giggles.
Yeah. Sadly, we didn't have one of those little stickers they put on there, like that stickerish image they put on all of their committee releases. But yeah, I remember when they were doing the core and the committee release, and the bottles looked absolutely identical half the time, and it was like you just have to look at the ABV to tell the difference between them. Like the Dark Cove and the Black were both like very, very similar, identical labels. But yeah. Another fun fact is that the Ardbeg A image is trademarked. So they trademarked that back in 1911. So they kind of knew they were onto a good thing, I suppose.
The Sesame Street, no?
The little letter A.
A is for Ardbeg.
I will say modern Sesame Street is so funny. But that is a discussion for another day.
This can, if you gave me blind and told me this is an Octomore, I'd go, yeah, it's a fighting chance. It's got the peat in it, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely that. Like,
the Port Charlotte smoke is so distinctive though. It stands out like a sore thumb. It's quite bold. This one I'd probably I think there's a Vegemite note in this, almost like a malt character, the concentrated yeast character that sort of comes through with that smoke, which I find different.
I'm gonna compare with an Octomore after this, but yeah, I get what you're saying. That's cool. It's worth, yeah. Now that you say it.
Yeah, I agree. I understand what you mean, Ollie, with that like that freshness and that kind of high note, but it's just missing that brie cheese aspect that Port Charlotte always has. And yeah, it's like if Port Charlotte and Kilchoman maybe had like a love child. It's that sharp grassiness of the Kilchoman with the lightness of the Port Charlotte. So obviously we put up the poll for your favorite. You can vote for 2. So that it's more fair. We're not asking you to choose amongst your favorite child.
John, what are your top 2? Because you can't vote because we made you a host.
Look, the Uigeadail was good, and the Ardbog, I would say. The Supernova definitely wasn't it wasn't that kick in the face I was expecting from one of the most peated expressions. But it could just be that I've been sitting here for about 6 hours now drinking. So, maybe my senses have been numbed slightly.
Tom liked all of them.
What about you, Emma?
For me, the Traigh Bhan, I think the softness of the Traigh Bhan really draws me in. And the Uigeadail, though this Supernova is actually quite good. I think it is that slightly Port Charlotte-esque vibe that makes me love it a bit more. I think it's probably the Supernova and the Uigeadail that do it for me. The Uigeadail, hands down for me, though.
I think the Ardbog just takes me back to that raw Ardbeg dram. The Supernova's it's definitely good. It's punchy. Just I don't know. There's sort of like just a bit of that chewing on charcoal note coming through that I'm not a big fan of.
Fair enough.
Anyone else want to add their comments? Feel free to unmute yourself. Michael, you've been very quiet today. Yeah.
Sitting, contemplating.
These were a fantastic selection of whiskeys, by the way. Really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. I won't be sad to give the remainder of my taster to Lockie of the Ardbog, but he will have to fight me for the rest of them.
I definitely think they are onto a winner by maturing whiskey in space, like you said they were, Emma. So yeah.
You're incorrigible. That's what you are.
Shall we share the results?
Yeah, I can do it.
End poll, sharing.
I am surprised the first dram, which I cannot pronounce. I couldn't pronounce it earlier and I can't pronounce it now. Got no votes at all because it was good. It was just very light. Super light.
I was drinking the batch 3 recently, and that to me was one of the best I've tasted. I enjoyed that more than the batch 2. Like the batch 3, I found it was like, how do I describe it? Like white chocolatey notes coming through. Like that to me was like wicked whiskey. Love the batch 2, but maybe I don't know. We tasted it an hour and a half ago, and I didn't keep enough to taste again. Maybe that's why I didn't vote for it. But the batch 3 of that I find is one of my, don't have the back pocket for it, but that is a damn fine whiskey.
Yeah.
I if it was in the normal core range and we started with the wee beastie, made our way through the 10 and finished all the way with the Traigh Bhan, I reckon it would be one of the top 2 easily. But with the lineup tonight, it's like,
Yeah.
It is just so light and delicate compared to the last 3 and even Uigeadail. So it was such a different beast compared to what else has been on offer.
But I tell you what, like even drinking the range we had tonight, I was drinking the 10 between it, and then 10 completely different drinking experience. But that to me for a whiskey, it's amazing. It's something I'll always gravitate back towards. And that's why it's something that I would continue to drink, like between all that. And it was nice to like find that reference point between them. I think strangely, Ardbeg 10 doesn't stand up to them. It's a very different thing, but damn fine whiskey, even just between those ones, and to find that reference point again.
Yeah, that core identity that, what is it? They're sisters, not twins. And that kind of approach with all of these bottlings, they're the family resemblance between the core flavor profile of each of them and the smoke especially is definitely there.
I don't know if you want to disclose this, Emma, but I asked Lockie last night, because he's like, the Ardbog's going to be the favorite, and I go, okay, call the rest of them, and he's picked every single one in order. Maybe this is why he's the best bar manager, a whiskey bar manager in the entire world. Congrats to Lockie at Whiskey on Element there, but like he's picked every single one in order. He said that's how people are going to vote tonight. Like, yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, and like for him as well, it's even worse because they have so Brooke and Jules at Whiskey on Element have been collecting Ardbegs for like 2 decades now nearly. And they have the entire collection up on the bar on display. And as far as I'm aware, none of those bottles are getting opened anytime soon. So they're just there tormenting Lockie. And I think there is an Ardbog, and there's some Anoas, there's some even I hadn't heard of. Like, yeah, it's an insane
It's
lineup.
almost like
But
a
yeah,
double shelving now.
Hmm?
When I was down there last time, I was looking up, it's almost like double facing shelves now of it. Like the entire top, like next to the roof, is all Ardbeg.
I will let you know, I think a lot of them are just the empty boxes.
Empty bottles, yeah. I was saying.
I'm not 100% certain how many, but yeah, it's crazy to see them all up there, and it's beautiful.
On a completely unrelated but slightly related note, the pies that they've recently released, they are delicious.
Stop talking about the pies.
Fancy Hank's wine.
They are. I thought honestly it was a bit of a gimmick, but they are delicious, and I still can't stop thinking about them.
What pies?
So
Like a
Ardbeg
pie.
released these like collaborations with Fancy Hank's barbecue meats place, whatever, in Melbourne. And so they did these pies that have like a good whack of Ardbeg in them. And they were, I think it was last week, they were doing these things where you buy a ticket and you get a bottle of the 8-year-old discussion, 2 cocktails and 2 pies. And I was like, I want the pie and I don't want the pie. Like, how much can I give you for the pie? I just want the pie. And I'm like, who will buy the bottle so that I can have a pie? Yeah, Paul, the peep me. Did you end up going to that, Paul, or was it?
I didn't get to try it, unfortunately. I wanted to, but yeah, I wasn't willing to buy a bottle for it either.
Oh,
Yeah.
Look at that. Where do we get them?
We've got ours next week.
Hmm?
Queensland has theirs next week. They were a bit delayed, so I'm looking forward to it.
That is bullshit. We never get anything like that down here.
So I got invited to the official media launch in Sydney from Moe. Thank you. And it was me and like 3 other people who drink whiskey, and like we all saw each other. And then there was like 40 TikTok influencers who took photos in front of this smoker. And we're sitting there and they didn't even take a bite. They didn't drink the whiskey because it was too peaty.
I love how, Ollie, you try to pretend you are not a TikTok influencer. We know you got invited because you're a TikTok influencer. Like,
no, I started one after that because I was like, I'm in the wrong business here. So, but the best thing about it, like we sat there for 2 hours and we had like 8 pies. We just kept going. It was insanely good because they were like, we made all these pies and people just leaving them there. And I'm like, I just can't leave them to die.
And you didn't take one to freeze for me for safekeeping.
Or me. Like, we're not going to get pies in Tasmania.
Well, John, should we fly up to Queensland and you can?
Yeah. So when is the launch in Queensland?
I think it's, I've got it booked on the 28th, so it must be maybe 26, 27, 28 or something like that. So
this weekend.
Yeah. This weekend. Oh my Lord.
I'm going to look into it.
It's at Savile Row.
Okay.
I'm going to look into that. I might be able to work that. Anything for a pie.
Honestly, I was surprised how good they were. I was like, yeah, a little bit of smoke or something. I was like, no, it's the real deal.
I heard the sauce was pretty good as well.
Ooh, the barbecue sauce?
Apparently there was sauce on the tables. Shane from up here talked about it and may have swiped the bottle, so.
We can neither confirm nor deny that happened.
Exactly.
I
don't know, it may have been good, who knows?
Yeah, cool. Well, I'm gonna try and bully the guys at Whiskey Nail Me into if they have any left over. But who knows?
I'm going to stop the recording. So officially, big thanks to our guest Chaos, John. Thank you to our presenter Emma, and massive thanks to all of you for joining us tonight on a very cool tasting,